don't know how important the tungsten is gonna. No, we don't need sulfur. I almost harvested the wrong item. But yeah, it was unfortunate. Like, it happens, but it happens too often. Is the simple truth of it. Which isn't too surprising. I've told this story to some of my friends anyway, so I'm also not above telling it on stream. Growing up, my dad was sort of the golden child among his siblings. Yeah. Which unfortunately isn't something he ever got over, which turned him into something of a bag of sheep, because it was a case of whenever people would like do him a favor or extend him a courtesy, he would ask for more. Instead of saying thank you, like a normal person would, he would take the piss. So there's a couple of stories that spring to mind when I talk about this. The one that stands out the most is my aunt and uncle used to have a caravan that was their sort of their retirement plan, for lack of a better way of putting it. They had it in like a, what's the word I'm looking for? In a holiday park. So they had the space for it and it would rent it out. And this is quite a long time ago, because my dad's parents were still around then, so that's how I know it was a while ago. But we'd gone up to see them, and my grandmother had said, "Hey, can Amber and his dad use the caravan while they're up?" And my aunt was like, "Yeah, that's no problem. They're coming up for a week. We don't have any bookings. That's fine. We'll take it off for that week," which is, you know, very reasonable and very, very kind of them. The issue comes in just after that week. So the plan was we were going to be up for a week. We were going to be over in Cornwall for the week. And all told, it was a very nice trip. And it was good seeing family. But the issue we had is we get to the day that we're supposed to leave. And Dad tells my grandmother that we're staying another week. Not told me or anyone else that was the plan. And just decided to stay. Which, given that while we were there, my aunt and uncle were feeding us, and we were staying in their caravan for free that they normally rent out. And it was lots of little instances like that where it was, if you gave an inch, you'd take a mile kind of situations, which has not endeared himself to his remaining siblings or any of his in-laws, unsurprisingly. And so when I was up, I was like, hey, I'm thinking I might try and take some time off in August to come and visit. I'm not telling my dad when. I was just thinking I'd pop up, let you know when I'm thinking of coming, and saying, hey, if you're free, I'd love to see you. And can you contact any of my cousins and things so that I can try and catch up with them properly? Because growing up, on my dad's side, whilst I'm in the middle age-wise, the closest to me in terms of family that's slightly older, in terms of my older cousins, is 8 years older than me. And the closest that is younger than me, off the top of my head, I believe, is 6 or 7 years younger than me. So there's a fairly sizable age gap, right? When we were kids, it was there, but it didn't matter too much, because when you're kids, you just kind of, you get along with it, right? as like we've gotten older, in theory that distance should close. The trouble is it hasn't as much, and that's not anybody's. That's not any of their fault because they don't see me as often. But also like their context memory of when they see me have been instances where my dad's been taking the piss, and obviously where they've been, there's been that 6 to 8 year age gap in some, and like more in some cases. That jades their memories of me. So it's not, and unlike when I go and see my mum's side of the family, which, and again, as I say, this isn't any of the family's fault as such. I know exactly who I blame for the situation being that way. It's when I go and see my mum's side of the family, it could be 3 or 4 years since I've seen anything, but it's like I spoke to them last week. And that was not the case with my dad's side of the family. And for when I was in my teens, I never really understood why. And it's only been in the last 5 years or so when I'm getting the full context of stories of things that have happened. I'm like, oh, he's just been taking the piss. It's no wonder they don't have a lot of time for him. And then by extension myself, because when I was a kid, the only way they'd see me is if he was invited to stuff and they didn't really want to deal with it. And it's, again, it's another one of those where it's like, it sucks, but it is also what it is, right? And I for sure would prefer to be in a situation where I was much closer with the rest of that family. But also, I don't have a lot of time for people in general. Like, I don't mean that in a negative way. I just, like, I get bored with small talk, which is what a lot of family conversations tend to devolve into. Because if you aren't seeing each other on the regular, you're not going to know what you can talk about with them. And them not knowing what we've got in common or things like that means that they don't know where to start that conversation. And that's then made worse when there's a bigger gap between us because it's been 5-10 years since I've last seen them, right? But again, like, it's one of those that I am processing, but there's no point dwelling too much on it. It's good to know why things are as they are, but I'm also like, I'm not gonna dwell on it because that just makes it feel worse, for lack of a better way of putting it. I was reading a book recently called Don't Believe Everything You Think, which is honestly, it's a fascinating book in its own right. I highly recommend it. But it mostly talks about ways to build emotional resilience. So like one of the primary things it talks about is an idea that they apparently came across in Buddhism, which is there are whenever you are struck so the example they use is arrows in this book, which is wherever you're struck by arrows in life, the first arrow is pain. It's unavoidable. It is a thing that happens, and it is a natural part of the human experience. The second arrow, however, is optional. The second arrow itself is suffering, and how you react to the first arrow determines whether the second one hits you. So I was reading through that, and I like at surface stuff, I think, yeah, sure, that's more like new agey nonsense. But as I like stopped to actually consider it, instead of, because you know, it's very easy to dismiss stuff like that out of hand as people being over the top and things like that. But as I actually stopped to consider it, just to make sure I wasn't dismissing something useful for no reason, the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. Because, like, you can dwell on how much something sucks or why it's unfortunate or uncomfortable or upsetting, right? Or you can just go, well, this sucks anyway, and move on and find a new focus. It's also links back to how humans process physical pain. So there's a fun thing in human biology, which is pain primacy, which is if you get hurt, like severely hurt, like break your arm, for example, you can temporarily distract yourself from that pain by sustaining a minor injury instead. So, like, it could be spraining a knuckle on your hand, which is going to hurt less than the broken bone, and your brain will focus on that because it's the most recent injury. And so the reason it focuses, and like, there's a whole bunch of this because, truthfully, I went down a big. So after reading that book, I went down a big rabbit hole, both of like evolutionary psychology and biology. And so, from an evolutionary perspective, it's really interesting how that happened. And the reasoning behind it, from what they can gather, is the reason it focuses on the most recent injury is because your body is assuming that it's whatever attack it was under is continuing. And as such, it needs to get you somewhere safe. And so it focuses on the most recent injury because that's the one most likely to happen again. I'm sorry, I feel like I've lost you along the way here. Yeah. That's fair. It is one of those things that unfortunately happens with streams, is that either I am just an idiot goofball or a little on the quiet side, or I end up going like way deep into philosophy and like biology and psychology. I don't seem to have like a consistent like this is the way I think about stuff. Which is funny, at least to me. Ooh, data chips. I don't know that I need algae right now, but apparently I can only pick up the one. That's interesting. Hold on a sec. One of the dogs just decided they were going to yap at nothing. So I thought I would check on them, and it turns out, as I suspected, it was nothing. Yeah. Usually if more than one of them are going off, I assume that someone has walked too close to the house and they've gotten offended. But when it's just one of them going off every few seconds, she's usually just being an idiot and got stuck in a loop. Because I swear, they just behave like glitchy NPCs. Ooh, I might suffocate before I get back to oxygen. It's going to be close. It's going to be close. We might die this time. Oh, we didn't. Somehow we made it.